Awesome. So welcome everybody. Again, thank you for joining us. If you've never heard of Perennia before, we are a Nova Scotia Crown Corporation. Our mandate is to support the growth, transformation, and economic development in Nova Scotia's agriculture, seafood, cannabis, and food and beverage sectors. Now, I say we are a Nova Scotia company, and it is true. We are a Crown Corporation of the province of Nova Scotia. However, we have an expansive team that does all kinds of food development work for people outside of the province as well. So it's hard to describe who Perennia is, but I like to say that everything from the soil and the wharf to the store, we can help you with. So we have agriculture specialists and seafood specialists who help with the raw product. We have specialists in like small fruit or vegetables or seafood or whatever. And then we have product development specialists. So say you want to develop a product, you need help with the nutritional facts table, a best before date, prototyping, scale up, recipe development, ingredient sourcing, all those things. We have food scientists that are here to help. We have regulatory food safety specialists as well, so help you with food safety reviews, help you lay out a floor plan for a kitchen so that it's the safest possible, things like that. And then we also have our quality and food safety team. So when you want to grow bigger and say you need HACCP training or a HACCP-based food safety plan or want to sell in a larger retailer, for example, our quality and food safety team can help you assess what you need, help you develop your plan, do some coaching, some training, all those things. That is a very quick rundown of what we do. There's a lot. Um, Before we move on, I want to direct you to the Perennia Academy, which is we have hundreds of free resources on product development and quality and food safety. And I mean, they are free. You can just make an account and you don't even have to make an account if you don't want to. You can just download these fact sheets and webinars and templates and guides and all kinds of things. And then you can save them to your library and it's free. We have training courses, those are paid, but we often have funding programs for Nova Scotia clients to help pay for those training courses. So they're quite affordable, I would say. I am going to share a link later on in the chat with a resource that is on the Perennia Academy that Peter will talk about. So you'll be able to get a good feel of what it looks like. Now, as mentioned, I am joined by Peter Chapman of SKUFood. Peter's experience includes the entire supply chain and retail merchandising. He worked at Canada's largest food retailer, Loblaws, for nearly 20 years. In 2007, Peter started a company to provide customized services to producers, processors, and retailers across Canada, like you. He is the author of A la Carte, A Supplier's Guide to Retailers' Priorities. He is the president of Atlantic Food and Beverage. He was the national president of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers in 2021. He has provided food industry insights to the Canadian Grocer, the Global Mail, Maclean's Canada, and the Grower, and he has done some speaking gigs for Perennia quite a few times. And all our clients love to hear from him, and we love to hear from him. So we're really, really pleased to have him here with us. So Peter, without further ado, please take it away.
All right, thanks very much, Carolyn, and appreciate everybody joining us to talk about pricing and from my perspective, I think the model that Perennia employs when Carolyn explains it to you, where it goes really from, beginning to end for a food product, I think is so important. A lot of times we can't just produce things in isolation. We have to think about all of the other components that allow you to get into the value chain and sell, whether you're going to sell direct or you're going to sell through specialty stores or even into the large retailers or export. So I think the model that Pernia brings to the table is so important because it's not just the product we need. We need to be able to get it into the market and understand the market. So excited to be here and talk about pricing, which is definitely one of those important components of success in the market. Pricing is such a complicated thing because it impacts your profits, it impacts your sales in terms, if you're priced high, low, that kind of thing. And you can't do it in isolation. And I think that's one of the big takeaways I hope that you have from today is that you definitely need to price your products based on what's going on in your own business with regards to costs and you know the expenses that you incur to produce your products and the profits that you want to earn. But also you need to understand what's going on out there in the marketplace and that you can't just sort of price in isolation. So we're going to talk about some different aspects with regards to that as we go through the different components of the session. And for me in our industry, you know, I know people have so much passion about their products, and I admire the amount of work and effort and resources that people have to put into to either produce a product or develop one and get it into the marketplace. But I always try to remind people that success is not just about producing a great product. It's about selling the great product you produce. And getting your products priced right is an integral component of that selling piece. So we're going to focus on that today. And as we go through it, what I want to talk a little bit about is consumers. I think it's important. We always have to start with the people who buy our products and understand them. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with consumers right now. Then we're going to talk about that value proposition because when you price your products, you need to think about what are people willing to pay for? What is it that they're getting for all this hard work that you're doing? And so we'll talk about that and encourage you to think about that when you're looking at your pricing. Then we're going to dive into the pricing, and yes, we will get to how to price your products. And then a lot of people are selling direct, whether it's at a farmer's market or through their own facility, that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about some of the benefits of selling direct. And I think there's a cost to selling direct if you're going to have a booth at a market or you're going to have your own facility, that kind of thing. But there's also some great benefits to that. So we're going to talk about some of those benefits and help you see those and just remind you about them. So let's talk about consumers first. And I think that consumers are changing so much, and we have to stay on top of the change and make sure that you are close to them. And obviously, the one of the biggest trends, and I can tell you, I started working in a grocery store, and I almost hate to say the year, but it was 1983 that I started working in a store. And yes, brown corduroy pants, beige shirt, brown tie. It was a great time to work in retail. But in all my years in this industry, I can tell you that the shift we have seen in the last few months with regards to sort of supporting Canadian products, I've never seen a shift as dramatic in all my time. I mean, we've had things come and go in our industry, but this change that we are seeing with consumers almost adamant that they're going to support Canadian products and sort of looking at labels more than they ever have, trying to understand where products are coming from. If you look online, you can see if you go on Facebook and see this sort of Made in Canada group that we have millions of people have joined. And this morning I was looking on there and there was somebody had posted that they had purchased a product from Prince Edward Island, and there were hundreds of comments about the product saying, "Oh, I want to get it," or "Where do I get it?" And then people would tell them where. And consumers are very much engaged in this right now. So, as much as the chaos is challenging, and for those of you who are producers and processors, a lot of challenges, perhaps with ingredient costs, packaging costs, uncertainty, all those kind of things, it has brought tremendous opportunity for Canadian products. So I think that it is right now probably a huge opportunity to get to the shelf. It doesn't guarantee success, but it is making it easier to get to the shelf. And it's also a time when consumers are perhaps abandoning some brands that they have been very loyal to from the US and trying Canadian products. Some of it because of the tariff situation where we see pricing, but also just the fact that they want to support Canadian. So please make sure that your products are very clear that it is Canadian. You use that maple leaf and really reinforce, don't assume that people know, because now is the time when you can get people to switch brands and that kind of thing. So a huge shift with consumers, which, as I say, I've never seen as big a shift in all my time in this crazy industry that we're all in. So the next thing with consumers is price, and I think that you have to be aware that We've been through a period of very high food inflation, and consumers are very aware of the price they pay for products. And they're not as knowledgeable as they think they are. I can tell you when I was at Loblaw, we used to do a lot of work with consumers trying to understand, how knowledgeable are they really? They think they know, but when you give them a pen and paper and say, what's the retail price of this product and that product, they're not quite as accurate as they think they are. But the reality is, it's perception. And they perceive that they're paying a lot for food right now. So we have to be aware of that in our industry. So pricing, very important, and probably more important than it was a few years back. Another thing I think we have to be aware of with consumers is taste. And especially when people feel like they're paying a lot for food, they're more focused on, is that food delivering what I want it to deliver? So we need to be objective about that. I'm sure that many of the people who are producers and processors, you have great faith in your products and you put a lot of work into developing them and getting them to the market. But please be objective about it. Make sure that you are getting the opinions from consumers and that your product is, delivering what they're looking for when they're buying the products. Another thing happening in our marketplace is consumers are changing, and I would say probably changing faster than ever with the access to information that they have and travel and all these kind of things. So the one story that I always sort of think about when I talk about changing consumers is, and this was actually a client of mine down in the Annapolis Valley, and they had fields of sweet corn, and they sold corn into the retailers, but also they had their own corn stand and selling corn at the side of the road kind of thing. And one day a person came along and she asked the student that they had running the corn stand about some stuff that was growing between the rows of corn. And so this was tillage radish that they had planted between the rows as something that they would plow back into the field at the end of the season as a micronutrient to get ready for the next crop the following year. So this was something they had always done and been successful. Perhaps it came from a perennial specialist, I don't know. But this was something that they had been doing. So the person asked if they could just take some of that, and the person at the corn stand said, "Sure, yeah, I guess so. I mean, they just plow it in at the end of the year anyway, so if you want to take some, go for it." So that was fine. The person did that. Then a couple days later, the farmer came along, and there were probably about 8 vans at the side of the road, and there was a full-on harvest going on of this tillage radish. And for those of you who are farmers, I know you really don't appreciate it when people just go into your fields and take things. So the question was asked, what are you people doing? What's going on? And so the woman who sort of had organized this came over and said, well, actually, we are all new to Canada from Syria, and this is something we haven't seen since we left home. And we use the leaves, we make tea, we use the radish for another dish, which is something that they are very used to at home. And for them, this was a taste of home, which they had not seen since they came to Canada. So when I think of changing consumers and sticking close to understanding how the trends and what new people to Canada are looking for, I think we have to talk to them and understand and really try to see what tastes, what flavors, what products they're interested in, because they are a very significant part of the buying power within our country now. So we have to understand what these consumers are looking for. So I always think back to the tillage radish, and that's something that those people were very excited about. It was a taste of home to them. So think about how consumers are changing, what you can do within your own business to appeal to consumers, what flavors, tastes that they're looking for. And something we have to continue to be aware of as our population evolves. Another trend with consumers, which probably has taken a bit of a back seat lately, is sustainability. It definitely was something that got a lot of airtime for a period of time. And then once we get into the period of inflation, sustainability perhaps became a little bit less important to some consumers. But the reality is, it is still an issue. And I think in the regulatory environment, we're still going to see pushes for change. And when we think about sustainability, what I would encourage you to think about is sort of three different buckets. One being your environmental footprint. So that's why I have the reusable grocery bags there at Sobeys. what what can you do? What are you doing to reduce your environmental footprint? The next thing being food waste, which I think is a huge issue in our industry and something that if you can you reduce food waste, you increase your marketable yield, which should be a good thing for your business. And then the third thing is packaging, which we know is big on the minds of the regulators, and trying to reduce single-use plastic and that kind of thing. So definitely still there, and I would think perhaps if a lot of you are selling at markets or direct to consumers, that target market perhaps might be a little bit more interested in sustainability than people who may be shopping in some of the big box stores or something. So, and that's maybe a generalization, but you should make sure you're understanding how important this is to your target market. Another trend is e-commerce, and if you're selling direct, e-commerce can be an opportunity for you if you have a website and you have the ability to communicate directly with people, and whether it's even something like a CSA program where you're communicating directly and selling through that model. So it's definitely in Canada continues to grow, and Nielsen, who measure a lot of these things in food and beverage industry, would tell us that in Canada, about 12 to 13% of food and beverage is now purchased online. Now, that would include the big retailers' website like superstore.ca or walmart.ca, but a lot of it goes direct as well. So it's definitely a channel to consider, whether it's right or not for your business, for your products, for your target market. That's for you to determine. But we know that we see 12 to 13% in Canada, around 19% in the US, and closer to 30% in Asia and some European markets. So it's probably going to continue to grow in Canada. So we have to be aware of it and understand it. And the costs of doing business in e-commerce can be different too. So as we kind of wrap up the segment on consumers, and I hope that it just gets you thinking about consumers because we can't operate in an environment where we're just making things. We have to think about those people who are buying our products and what they're looking for, what's important to them, and it impacts your pricing because we have to think about what they value, and they value certain things more than others sometimes. So think about that when you're pricing your products and your consumers. So as we kind of wrap up that segment, what I wanted to just share with you was a quick story. And I was doing in a store in Nova Scotia, one of my clients was doing a demo as part of one of the retailers' sort of meet the grower days. So I went down to see what was going on and how things were going. And so I'm there, and a consumer comes by with her cart, and she stopped to talk to us, and she said, "Oh, it's so great to see the growers here. It's just phenomenal. We in our household we only support local products, and in fresh produce we change our buying habits all year to when the fresh products are available in the summer months, we buy the berries and things, and then in the winter months we shift and we do more sort of storage things." And we're like, "Wow, that's like a real commitment to supporting local, and that's pretty impressive." And she said, "Oh yeah, yeah." And so she walked along and didn't get 15 feet from us and reached into a big bin of Texas watermelon and took it out of the bin and put it into her shopping cart. So we're looking at her going, "Okay, so 30 seconds ago you told us that you only support local and you shift your buying all the time. And now you just reach in and pick out a bin which says Texas watermelon." So I think we have to also remember what consumers say and what they do can be two different things. And if you're selling direct, you have a great opportunity to talk to those people and really understand what's important to them and see them in action. So make sure you pay attention to consumers, and it's important. So as we get now into more about the pricing and how to price your products, the value proposition that you bring to the table is really important. And you really do need to understand your target market. You need to know who are those people who are going to buy your products, who is most likely to buy your products. And if that's a family of four with two kids or whatever it is, then understand what are they looking for? What's important to them? And that's can impact how you price your product. So make sure that you have a great definition of your target market. If I was to come along and talk to you and say, "Who's going to buy your products?" You should be able to tell the story about those people better than anybody. So remember that the different segments of the market have different priorities and are willing to pay different things for different prices for different values. So make sure you understand those people. The next thing is you need to understand your category. You need to understand who you are competing against. And I don't think there's too many products that are really in isolation. So if you are selling products. If it's at a market, then there could be other people selling. If I look at the screen, there's a picture of sort of a meat case with some sausages in it. So the reality is consumers who are going to be buying sausages may be looking and saying, okay, this one over here has these features. This one over here has different features. What is the value to them? So make sure you understand your category. Make sure you understand how things are priced in your category and what attributes people are bringing in, what new flavors are coming out. I don't know. It continues to change all the time. And you go into so many categories and it's dill pickle everything all of a sudden. So I don't know if you're in sausages, if there's a dill pickle sausage out there, I don't know. But you need to stay abreast of what's going on in that category where you're competing. So take a look. Doesn't mean you got to copy everything. It doesn't mean that you got to sort of critique it all, but you just need to know that consumers see all these different products. So if you're in sausages, then they're looking at the different ones and you need to understand where you fit within that category. And you need to really think about why people buy. And that's that value proposition is really understanding your target market, understanding how you differentiate yourself within the category, which leads you to why people buy your products. So you need to think about those things and make sure that you can kind of walk through that piece and say, okay, these are our people. Here's our point of differentiation that appeals to them. And here's the real reason why they buy our products. And that will help you with a lot of things. It helps you with pricing. It helps you with how you promote your products. It helps you with how you talk about your products when consumers come up and if they ask you, "Oh, you're doing sausages." "Oh, yeah, and we're the most innovative sausage company. We've got new things. So here's our new flavors, and here's this what we're trying," and that kind of thing. So you need to think about why people buy and reinforce it in all of your communication all the time. And when you look at your category and you're focused on that value proposition, I would always encourage you to be a bit strategic about it. It's not just about producing a product. And the story I would share with you would be Dairy Isle cheese, which is made by ADL over in Prince Edward Island. And when ADL came to us and they said, can you help us? We want to sell more cheese. And I said, okay, that's great. Um, so we talked about different things, and one of the things which we talked about was how much cheese do they want to sell. And so when they told me the number of pounds or kgs of cheese they want to sell, it was obvious that we needed to put that product in the grocery aisle in the grocery store, not in the deli, because in the deli we just don't sell as much cheese. It's a higher quality product, but the volume is much lower. And it wasn't a natural food product because it wasn't going to be organic or meet some of the criteria for that. So we had to put it into the grocery aisle. And then we said, okay, we're going to put it in the grocery aisle. We're going to have to now compete against Saputo. We have to compete against, at that time, Kraft. These are pretty big players who've got deep pockets. So we're not going to outspend them. We need to be smart. So we came with a different size product. We came with a product that had no modified milk ingredients. So we could say it was 100% Canadian milk and that it was naturally aged. And that made a difference. And then the other thing we did was we went with what we called more of an everyday low cost strategy. So instead of like the other products in the category, which if you shop in that category, you would know that they're like $8.99 at regular price and then $4.77 on special. So we didn't want to do that because we can't compete with them. We needed to be a smaller size where we could be a lower retail every day and be different that way. So think about how you compete within the category and make sure that when you have the opportunity to make some of those decisions that you're thinking strategically. And then the last segment about the value proposition is do what they can't do. We're not big multinational players who can spend millions of dollars or hire celebrities and all these kind of things. It's just not reality. But you can do lots of things that they can't do. So this is an example. Many of you might be familiar with the hand pie company over in Prince Edward Island. Sarah's grown her business from a one little spot at the Borden village to now she's shipping across the bridge. She has a CFIA certified facility. She's into Sobeys and into Loblaws. So she's been able to grow her business. But when she was growing it and restricted only to selling in Prince Edward Island, a lot of specialty stores, so she started writing a note inside her master case to the people who worked in the store saying, thanks for putting our product on the shelf. We really appreciate it, that kind of thing. And so the store was like, holy smokes, the vendor's sending a message to our people for, saying thanks to putting our product out on the shelf. And then they put it on social media, and then all of a sudden everybody knows about it. So Coke and Pepsi are not going to do that. Kellogg's are not going to do that. So think about things. If you're selling into specialty markets or that kind of thing, what can you do that's a little different? And so what we always want to remind people is sort of do what the big players can't do. You can do things that are different, unique to our market, that kind of thing. So think about the things that you can do that they can't do. Now, one thing I have for you today is working in this industry, we kind of get our own language going and that kind of thing. So we've put together a PDF that has over 100 industry terms defined. So you hear me talk about things like EDLC, like everyday low cost, or EDLP, everyday low price. These are things that some of us in the industry that you know what it is, and other people those are terms which they're not as familiar with. So we put together this PDF for you. So that'll take you to our SKUFood website, that QR code, and you can download the PDF. It does add you to our newsletter mailing list, which we do every Friday. And I would tell you that we don't sell stuff on the newsletter. It's really meant to be informative for people in the food and beverage industry to help you do a better job selling your products. So if that PDF is of interest, you can use that QR code and grab it. And if you have any trouble or anything, you can always send me an email, and my email will be at the end of the presentation as well. So hopefully that's useful to you. All right, so let's talk about pricing your products. And what we're going to do is give you a couple of different models, which I would encourage you to use in pricing. And Carolyn, maybe I should just stop for a second. I've been doing a lot of talking. Do you have any questions, or is there anybody asking anything right now before I dive into sort of the nuts and bolts of pricing?
We got a couple questions, but I think I'm going to tackle them later on and see if you don't talk about them during this section of your presentation. However, I do want to take a second to mention, because we talked about things being made in Canada and product of Canada and how very trendy they are. I do want to point everybody to the CFIA labeling requirements. You can't just put something is made in Canada. There are regulations about it. Similarly with selling your products online, if it's something that you're interested in doing, check your province's local regulations, because there are some for selling online. So the link to the CFIA labeling requirements is there for the Canadian food. But if you have any other questions about selling online or things like that, contact Brennan. We can help you. I'd say we're more experts in Nova Scotia, but if you're outside of the province, we might be able to direct you to the proper resources. So yes, we have a couple questions, but I'm going to wait. If
Okay.
someone else has some other questions that they thought of or might think of later, please put them in the Q&A and we will get to them.
Awesome. And I agree. You definitely have to follow the regulatory
Yes.
environment with regards to labeling.
Yeah.
You can't do what you want to do.
I'm a marketing person, so I understand like made in Canada is great marketing, but
Yeah, you do have to follow the regulations.
make sure we have a safe product as well.
Exactly. Yep. So the first model that I'm going to share with you is what we refer to as cost-based pricing. And as we talk about pricing, I'm going to use sort of an example of a refrigerated salad dressing as sort of the product that we're going to refer to as we go through the discussion about pricing. And so that's just a picture of the set in one of the grocery stores, but understanding that we're talking a lot about products that are sold at markets and even direct, that kind of thing. But that's the category that I'm going to refer to a few different times. So in cost-based pricing, what we're going to do is sort of build your price, your selling price from the ground up. So that means we're going to take the cost that you incur in your business to produce the product and to sell the product and to operate your business. And that will help us get to a selling price. And we're going to do that one first, and then I'm going to give you another model. And as always, I would recommend you do both. So cost-based pricing, the first thing you really need to understand, and The product we're going to talk about is a refrigerated blueberry vinaigrette salad dressing. So you need to understand the cost of your ingredients. And that is one of the big challenges in food production and food processing is the costs fluctuate. And so we need to be on top of that and make sure that every time that you do produce your product, that you are on top of understanding what your costs are. And we've developed a simple sort of costing sheet for you to use. And that's what Carolyn referred to at the outset, that is a resource that you can use in your business. And it's really meant to be a starting point. This is not going to be the final sort of costing sheet that probably many of you could use because you need to customize it for your own product and how you're doing business. But it's a simple costing sheet that will help you get started. So in food production, usually you're not just going to make one bottle of blueberry vinaigrette, you're going to make a bunch of bottles and then you're going to, have it like a batch size. So what you need to do is make sure you understand those costs of your ingredients. And if depending on the variability and that kind of thing, you really need to understand what is your cost every time you produce a batch of product. Now, you can't keep changing your price all the time in the marketplace, but you do need to understand what is a batch of product costing us. So you can see we listed a few of the ingredients in our blueberry vinaigrette there. And to and then you look at the quantity that we need to produce a batch. So you could when you do the math and you say that I'll use the blueberries as an example, that we need 50 units and they cost $2 each, that it would be $100 worth of blueberries in that one batch to produce our vinaigrette. So make sure you stay on top of those ingredient costs, really important, and they'd fluctuate. The next thing you need to understand and to determine your cost of goods is what is it costing you to produce the product? What is the packaging costs that you incur? And then the next thing is labor. And this is one of the things where a lot of times we see people, they're kind of like, well, it's hard to value my time and I'm going to be doing it anyway and that kind of thing. But as you try to get a good price for your product, you need to assign a value to your labor. And part of it is that you need to make sure it's included in your cost, but also that if you decide to scale your business and grow it, that you have something built into your pricing to pay somebody to do this work for you. So we need to make sure that you have something built in to pay yourself and that you assign a value to it. So if we go back to our costing sheet, here's the little segment where we talk about the packaging costs. So make sure that you include that. And usually that's more stable. You should be able to kind of get a pretty good handle on that. And then you have a production facility. So whether you have your own or you're renting a commercial kitchen or something like that, you have to value that into there. And then also the labor. So if you have 3 hours of your own time and you say, well, as much as we'd all like to make three or $400 an hour. The reality is for doing production, and maybe that is the value that you would assign to the person who's kind of leading it would be $30 an hour. And then maybe you have somebody helping for $17 an hour. So you try to assign some labor costs to that and figure out the cost of goods of your product. So that's what we're doing here, where you can see we're going to make a batch of 500. And if you go back to the ingredients, it was $755 was the total cost. So it works out to $1.51 per unit. And the same thing you can see for packaging, the production, and then the labor down here. So our cost of goods to make a batch of 500 would be about $1,500, which works out to about $3.17 per unit. So those are what we would kind of look at as our basic cost of goods to get that blueberry vinaigrette produced. So you need to keep track of that. And when you do a batch, you need to make sure you understand that. And this number probably will fluctuate a little bit if your blueberry price changes or something like that. Then there's other components that you need to factor into your pricing. And this is one where I see a lot of people don't put in enough is for sales and marketing. And you need to be able to promote your product. A lot of times people want to do sampling. You need to spend money on sales. I put the terms trade spend and marketing spend, and really those are terms which we talk about if you're selling into the bigger grocery chains like a Sobeys or something. But I think you want to think about it I think you want to think. That doesn't sound very good. You should consider this no matter how you're selling your product. So if you think of trade spend as perhaps one week you want to say save 50 cents. Maybe you have a big amount, or maybe the blueberry price went way down and you want to do a bit of a special to drive some extra sales. So we would call that trade spend, where you're investing, or if you're selling into a specialty retailer and they say, oh, it's July 1st, can you give us a little bit of a special price because we want to do a flyer? Something like that. We call that trade spend. So you have to have something built into your pricing to do that once in a while. You don't have to do it all the time, but you do need to think about it sometimes. And then what we call marketing spend is where you talk direct to the consumer. So those are things like your social media costs, or if you're doing public relations or things like that, where you're reaching out direct to the consumer. It all costs money. Whether you're making signage or whatever you're doing, it all costs money. So we recommend about 20 to 30% of your final selling price. Sometimes people say, oh, that's a lot, but you need to be able to promote your products. So think about that. Another thing that people don't always factor in enough is distribution, and you have to get your product into the market. So if you're selling at a farmer's market and you have to pay for a table or something like that, you would think of that as your distribution cost. You would also think about whether it's a truck or however you get there and that kind of thing. These are all costs that are in your business that you have to factor in. Now, if you're going to go and work with a distributor, somebody who's going to take your product and then take it out into specialty markets and that kind of thing, it's going to be 25 to 30% of the final selling price. It's a big number, more if it's refrigerated. So, again, we want to try to factor these things into your price so that if you want to scale your business, that it's factored into your pricing. But also a lot of times you're incurring some of these costs and you don't perhaps think about it as much because you go, oh, well, I'm going there anyway, or something like that. But the reality is you have to think about these costs in your business. And you also have overheads, depending on what level, what size of your business. Sometimes you need to have an accountant do your work for you. You need to have some insurance sometimes, that kind of thing. So you have to factor in some of that into your pricing. And then also, at the end of the day, we always encourage people to plan for your profits, not to kind of go, oh, okay, once I add up everything else, if there's something left, that's the profit. But if you plan for profit, then you're much more likely to get it. So we're going to build that into the pricing as well. So if we go back to our spreadsheet, we put some numbers in here, and these are what the markup would be to factor that into your sales and marketing. So you can see where the numbers we put 50%. That means that at the end of the day, it'll actually be about 25% of your selling price. So for every unit, you have $1.59 to put into sales and marketing. Some people might say, oh, Peter, that's too much in our world. Well, that's fine. Then you can change that number. This is really meant to be individual for what you're trying to do. But the reality is, you need quite a bit built in there to be able to promote, pay for signage, pay for your website, all those kind of things that all cost money. And then you can see the other numbers in there for overheads. Now you might say, Peter, we don't need $1.78 for distribution per unit because we're doing it and we can do it more efficiently or something like that. That's great. But you just have to remember that if you scale your business at some point, you're going to have to pay somebody else to do this. And then all of a sudden your price is going to go up and people are going to say, well, I used to buy it for this much. And you say, well, I'm distributing it now. Well, that doesn't really matter to them. It's really whether they're willing to pay the price for the value that you're delivering. So, what that all works out to, once you take our cost of goods and the markups that we've put in here, is that means that you should be selling that product into the market for about $7.96. So but that we're not done yet. Don't run out and start selling it for that yet. So we're going to come back to this, but that's what the price should be based on the markup model and that what we call cost-based pricing. And I'm going to give you a simple kind of formula you can use. So what we've done, what I've taken you through is looking at that cost of goods and labor, and then we've put a markup for each of these things. And you can see those are the markups that we used. And here's the formula. So if you want to do the math, then you can do this. It's your cost of goods, which worked out to 317 for our ingredients and our packaging and our production and our labor, 317 per unit. And then you multiply that by 1 plus the markup. So all those numbers, if I go back here, they add up to 151. If you add that up, So 1 plus 1.51. So you multiply your cost of goods, $3.17 by 2.51, and you should sell that product into the market at 7.96. So that's one model of pricing which we would encourage you to do, and then that's really keeps you close to your ingredients and understanding what's going on with pricing and the fluctuations that you have to incur in your business. So the next model of pricing,
Before we move on, I have just a
yep.
question I think might maybe help clarify some things. Is there an easy, this is from Randy Glassman, is there an easy explanation of the difference between margin and markup? Or maybe there isn't an easy explanation.
Yeah, that's something that often will catch people. And so markup is what you're increasing the price by to cover the costs within your business. And I'm not an accountant. I'm really more a retailer, but the markup is the amount that you would increase your cost of goods by to cover costs in your business. Margin, and we're going to talk about margin right now when we talk about the category-based pricing. And gross margin is really subtracting the if you take the price, the selling price for a product, and you subtract the cost, the difference is the margin. And so retailers always work on gross margin. Retailers never work on markup. So when I worked at Loblaw and produce was one of my departments and we had to deliver a gross margin of 45%, we did not take the products and say it costs a dollar multiplied by 1.45, sell it for $1.45. That's markup. Gross margin is different math, which I'm going to show you in a second. And you really want to make sure you understand the difference between the two. So when you're going to talk with a retailer, they are always going to work in gross margin. And so I'll show you the formula in a minute. But you definitely want to know the difference between the two.
Thank you.
Okay, so to do what we call, sorry, I didn't really introduce this. So to do what we call category-based pricing, what you need to do is really look at who you compete with, and then we're going to pick a retail. We're going to pretend we are the retailer. We're going to pick a price, and then we're going to do the math to work it backwards to say what the retailer would sell that product for. So if you're doing category-based pricing, and I told you earlier, you need to understand your category. So you're going to do a category review. You're going to go look at who you compete with, look at some of the different things, different sizes, attributes of their products, and get to a, uh, a method that we can compare the products one to one. So I'm going to show you a category review in a moment. Then we're going to say, okay, based on that, what's the right price for our product, given our attributes, our size, that kind of thing? Where do we fit within the category? Then we're going to use the category margin and we're going to work it backwards to determine that selling price. So to do a category review, you want to list all the items you compete with. So we're going to still talk about salad dressing here. So we're going to list a bunch of different salad dressings. And then we're going to calculate an equivalent price because we see different retails and different bottle sizes. So we're going to make it so we can compare. Then we're going to consider what the differences are, and we're going to calculate that right price. So here's our sort of basic category review kind of thing. We looked at a bunch of different things, which we kind of, to be honest, just made them up. But it gives you a sense of what you would see. So you see sometimes in a category some organic SKUs, there's a vegan SKU. Then we have some basic ones, which are kind of more we'll say the less expensive ones when you compare it on a per 100 mil basis. And then the one at the bottom is actually really the leading one in the category because you know that that one actually sells the most. So the XYZ is kind of the leader in the category. They retail for $9.99 for 350 mil, and that works out to about 285 per 100 mil. So that gives you a sense of where we need to sort of think about. The highest price in the category is 15.99. The cheapest one is 9.49. So we want to think about our product, how we compare against some of the other players in the category. So one of the things which you also need to know when you're doing this is what the margin will be. So in the example we're going to use, I'm going to just share with you a few. So these are sort of more retail margins for different products. Now it really depends on which channel. If you're competing in specialty stores, they're going to have higher margins. If you're competing in more of a discount environment, it's going to have lower margins. But for our example here, we're going to use 45% for produce in our product. So we're going to talk about our product. This is the one that we're doing. So we're going to have some unique flavors. We know that olive oil is the first ingredient. And believe it or not, in almost every other salad dressing, water is the first ingredient. So we're going to have olive oil because that gives a better eating experience. It gives us a point of differentiation. If you go back to that value proposition that we can talk about, we're going to be made in Canada. A lot of the other ones were made somewhere else, so we can talk about made in Canada. And then we're going to say, what's the right size? Because that's something that sometimes you can impact. You don't always get to determine the size, but it can be something that you should play around with, which is, I know it's not playing around, but experiment with different size products and bottles or boxes, whatever your product was in. So as we go through the example, what we decided, and this would be something if we were working with a smaller group, we could say, okay, why don't you go and try to think about what is the right retail price? What is the right bottle size? And this is art and science. There's no perfect answer to this stuff. You need to experiment sometimes. You need to work at it. You need to look at it and go, okay, does it work? Does it fit? Yes or no? That kind of thing. So what we decided and what we're going to propose is we're going to sell our salad dressing for $13.99. That would be the price that we would like to see in the store for the product, the retail price. And we're going to put it in a 375 ml bottle. So here I'm going to show you the category review now with our product. You can see it at the bottom added in. So we're not the most expensive product in the category because the other ones are organic and vegan and have some specialty ingredients in them. We don't have that, but we have olive oil as our first ingredient. So we believe we should be a premium relative to kind of the regular players in the category, we'll say. We went with a slightly larger bottle, and the reason for that is that we felt like if we could stand out a little bit on the shelf. Now, sometimes that's the right thing. Sometimes you want to go with a smaller bottle. Those are the kind of things you have to work within. And you can see that our price per 100 ml is definitely more than sort of the regular players in the category, but we believe because of our value proposition that our product is worth that much more. So that's how we would like to see it priced in the store. Now, you can't always determine the retail that a store is going to charge. If you're selling into the big players, you really can't tell them. If you're working with a specialty store or perhaps a market or something like that, a lot of times they'll ask you what's the best price and you can have some input. So we decided 13.99. Now you could make the case that maybe you should be 13.79 or there's different things and this is where you got to do some of the work to get to that right price. So here's the math, and this is the gross margin piece that we were referring to earlier. So to get to the category-based pricing, and again, this is determining the price you're going to sell your product to the store. Um, so what you would do is take that retail price that we want to see on the shelf, multiply it by 1 minus the gross margin that the store is operating with. So we picked 13.99 as our target retail price. We're going to multiply that by 1 minus 0.45. So if you remember, I told you that the margin in produce, the gross margin at the store was 45%. So we're going to multiply 13.99 times 0.55, and that gives us $7.69. So if you want to sell that into that specialty market for and see the retail price point at 13.99, you need to sell it to that store for $7.69. So that's how you can factor in the category-based pricing. And one thing we always recommend is that you do both. You do the cost-based pricing and you do category-based pricing. So if you remember back to our cost-based pricing model, and I'll just flip back to that slide for a second, we said to cover all your expenses and your cost of goods and have the markup built in for marketing and distribution, those kind of things, you need to sell it for $7.96. Then when we go to the category-based pricing model, we say if you want to see $13.99, you need to sell it for $7.69. So you see there's a difference. That's where your work really starts. You need to figure out, can I make it a little bit less expensive? Or if I have to sell it for $7.96, then I'm going to see a slightly higher retail price. So that's where you have to keep doing the work on your pricing. And if you're going to sell that product direct, and you know that it could be sold in markets and specialty stores, then you really need to think about selling it for $13.99 because that's what people are going to see in the marketplace. If you only sell it in there in direct for $8, the 7.96 rounded up, then you're really creating not exactly the right pricing proposition in the market because when you sell it direct for that, if you want to grow and sell it into a few specialty stores, they're going to have to make a margin on it. The stores have to have a margin to cover their cost of operating. So that's one thing you want to consider is what that margin would be when they're selling it so that the price that consumers will pay is closer to what really is the value and are they willing to give the value for that product. So those are the two methods of pricing that we would recommend. And again, always want to say you should do both. So those are how we would approach pricing. Now, Carolyn, there's about
There's a few.
six more slides about selling direct, or would you like to take a break and talk about pricing for a few minutes?
We have a few questions. I don't know if we'll have time to get to all of them, but what I will say is I'll send you the questions that we received that we didn't get a chance to answer, and maybe you can write out an answer and I will send it to the participants.
Hmm.
That way everybody gets the answer to their question. But in relation to this, since I'm gross margin and the retail price of products vary from retailer to retailer, how do you find out what that margin is, or what benchmarks would you consider on the category pricing?
Sure. Yep. So there's a few different ways to understand margin. One is you can ask the retailer. It's not a question that should be a difficult one for them to answer. If you say, what's the margin you're expecting in this department, that should be something they should be willing to tell you. Another way to do it is if you have other products you're selling into that retailer, you can calculate the margin, but look at the retail and the cost that you are charging them. And another one is if you know other people who are selling into that retailer, you can sometimes get an understanding of the margins they expect there too. So some different ways to do it, but it's important to know for sure.
On that note, we did get a question from Eric Jackson, who says since the wholesale price, which would be what we're talking about here, would be at least partially informed by competitors' wholesale pricing as well, is there a way to ethically gather that information?
Well, you can work it backwards. If you go into a store and see their product priced at $9 and you know that the category margin is 45%, you can work the math backwards to figure out what the store is paying for that product roughly. That's probably the best way to do it. Um, there are sometimes, usually people are not willing to share that, and they really shouldn't. I mean, that should be a number that's between that store and the other supplier, and you wouldn't want them sharing your costs. So it's better if it stays between those two entities. So I would say the best way is to look at the retail price and do the math with the margin, and you can figure out what they're paying.
Great, thank you. We won't be resorting to corporate espionage.
Yeah.
Is there a typical number to expect or to aim for profit on an item that you say you direct sell? That's a question from Krista.
Yeah, that's a tougher one. I think that's really individual depending on your business and the volume you're doing and that kind of thing. So I think that's really you need to get a sense and understand what is the profit you want to make and then again include that in your pricing. So if you want to make, and I'll just do some kind of simple math, if you want to make $1,000 profit and you sell 1,000 units, then you need to have a dollar built into every unit for profit. If you want to make $10,000, you need to have $10 built in. So it really depends on what you want to deliver for profit in your business and what's realistic of what the market will bear too.
All right. Is that markup of 151 that you shared earlier a general industry standard, or is that something that SKUFood came up with, or how is that?
I would say that that for us would be the starting point. And, that factors in what we believe you should have for sales and marketing, for distribution, for overheads and profit. Now, again, a starting point doesn't work for every category, doesn't work for every company. So you need to use that and then go, okay, what's realistic for us? and start to work with those numbers. But that's where we would always start.
All right, thank you. I don't know if you want to move on to your next slide, seeing as we only have.
Yep. So why don't I'll cover those and I'm happy to stay if we have some more questions as well. So just quickly to kind of wrap it up and selling direct, there's a cost to that. And when there's a cost to something, I'm always saying, okay, what's the benefit? So if you're selling direct, you're dealing with those consumers all the time. So make sure you're talking to them. Understand what are the realities of your product? How do they like it? Is it working for them? Do they like it as a six pack or a four pack or whatever? So you can see, there's some juice products in the valley on the shelf there. So how do they like that? Does it perform for them? That kind of thing. So talk to people and really understand, are they really getting what they want out of the product? Could it be improved a little bit? That kind of thing. When you're dealing direct with consumers, you want to think about, ask them, how are they using your product? So if you look at that pie, are they taking it home and cooking it right away? Are they putting it in the freezer? How did it perform for them if it did that? Do they use it in celebrations and that kind of thing? And then you can use that to promote on your social media and that kind of thing. So how are they using your product is really important. And that helps you with that value proposition. And they go, oh, it's the best. I replaced, the homemade pies I used to make with the ones that you sell. Well, there's pretty good value to that. That means it's worth something to them. So think about how they're using your products. Think about why they buy. So if ask them, talk to them, what are you doing with this product? How are you going to use it? What are you going to do with it when you take it home? Are you giving it away as a gift? Those kind of things. So really take advantage of talking to consumers directly. It's great when they want to pay you for your product. That's awesome. But also you're making an investment by being there. So talk to them and understand. And one other thing you can do is develop brand ambassadors. So as you build loyal people to your products, if you then decide, okay, I'm going to expand into some specialty markets, well, maybe they live in a different market and they can go in and take a look at your products and say, oh, this one's out of stock and you could use a little bit more of that one. So building brand ambassadors, people who are really fans of your product is really important. And you know who they are if you're selling direct. You know the ones who come back every week and are very loyal to you. So and then on the flip side, on the customer side, so if you're selling into stores, the most important thing for selling direct, if you're distributing it direct, is your sales. And that is one of the most important numbers in your business is how much are you selling at each store per week. And so keep track of it, watch it, try to figure out how to grow it. So measure your sales per store. That's a really, really important number that you want to use in your business. Talk to the staff. If you're distributing and you're going into these stores, make sure the staff are your advocates. They're there 24/7, well, not 24/7, but they're there 6, 7 days a week. So make sure that they are advocates for your products and that they know the benefits. They know your value proposition. They know the things that'll help make your product sell. So talk to the staff when you're going around into these stores. And then the last thing I would say is what works. So if you're Saltwinds Coffee and you've invested in printing this nice little colored sign that goes on the shelf, did it work? If your average sales per store were 8 units per week, you put this nice little colored sign in and your sales went up to 12. Well, that's a 50% increase in sales because you made a sign that explained your product to people. So when you do things, whether it's a sign or whether it's a demo or whether it's a 50 cents off, track the results and figure out what works with your product because you can't just keep spending money. You have to think about where am I getting a return on that investment that you're making. So if you're selling into those stores direct, talk to the staff. Did people buy more because we had that sign on it or what happened? That kind of thing. So make sure that you track what works for you, what helps you sell your product. So when you think about pricing for success, think about the consumer, think about your target market, consider that value proposition. What are they paying for? Then I would encourage you to do both of those pricing models and see how it comes out and factor in the different unique parts of your business. And there's lots of benefits to selling direct. It's not just about sort of getting that money. It's also about what you can learn from the consumers and what you can learn from the specialty stores if you're selling into that channel. So take advantage of all those things. And as we always want to remind you, and I told you I was going to say it a few times, is that success is not just about producing a great product to sell, it's about selling that great product you produce. And pricing your products right is a really important component of that. So So Carolyn, I just put my email on there. If people want to send a note, I can, and I'll let you know if I hear from anybody. But I'll for sure want to say thank you to people. 100% appreciate your time is valuable and joining us today. And it's a privilege to be here to provide some insights on the pricing and helping people sell their products. So I will stop sharing my screen, and if you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. I'll stop talking so you can ask me.
I do. We are at the 1 hour mark, but if you don't mind sticking around and if some of our participants don't mind sticking around, I will keep going with the questions. Of course, this is recorded and it will be up on our YouTube. So even if you missed the last few minutes, you'll be able to watch it. I'll put that up as soon as I am able to. So here is a couple questions. One of them I believe you would have answered during the presentation. So um and the other that one too.
That's a good thing.
Thank you. That's great. I make my product at home, so I can only sell at farmers markets or similar venues. How do I properly assess my in-home costs?
Mm. I would say that you maybe want to go and either get a couple of quotes about using a commercial kitchen or talk to some other people who use a commercial kitchen and say it's so much per hour to rent the space and factor that cost. So if it takes you 3 hours to produce a batch and you would have to rent a commercial kitchen for X dollars per hour, then you can factor that into your production costs.
If you're making it at home though, like do you factor in your mortgage costs or your electricity, things like that? How does that is that
Yeah, I would say that's probably harder to do that because, and I'm not a tax accountant, whether you can actually sort of factor that into your business and pay yourself rent and those kind of things. I think you want to talk to somebody who knows more. But when it comes to product pricing, what I would always go back to is sort of what is in the market, right? What other people are paying for in the market. So I would say you want to think about if you had to rent or could rent some space to do it, that's probably what other people that are sort of in your space are doing. So factor that amount in because, if you live in a, I don't know, $300,000 house, the cost of your mortgage and all those things may be very different than what a commercial kitchen is worth. So I think it's really what you would have to pay to do that somewhere within that sort of food ecosystem.
right? Okay, thank you. For early entrants in retail with independent neighborhood store, is there any advice on how to approach retailers to stock your products? Is there a model that works better? Um, yeah.
Yep. So one of the things I talked about was that sales per store, and that is your best story to take forward. I know a lot of times when we talk with people, they're so excited about their product and that kind of thing, which is awesome, and you need to have the passion and commitment behind your product. But really, what the retailer wants to know is how much is it going to sell? So if you have been selling direct at a market, and you can say every Saturday we sell, I don't know, 85 of these units every week, and we have a loyal clientele. I would say probably half of our people come back every week or every 2 weeks to buy our product. We've built a loyal clientele, and we're confident that we do that much every week. That's the story that you need to take to these stores because what they're interested in is selling products. They don't benefit by having hundreds of great products. They benefit when all those great products sell. So the best thing is to be able to take it in there and say, this is what we think it will sell in your store every week. And the second thing you want to do is you want to reinforce to them, what are you going to do to help drive sales? So if you have a great following at a market on Saturdays, are you going to put up a sign that says, our product is now available in ABC store and drive some people into that retail location? Well, that's what a store owner loves to see because now they're going to get a benefit out of putting your product on the shelf. Are you going to do social media ads that says, go into store ABC because our products are available there? All those kind of things. So what are you going to do to drive traffic into the store and what are you going to do to get that product to sell? Those are the two most important things. You have to talk about your product, but that's not why they're going to put it on the shelf. They're going to put it on the shelf because it's going to sell and that you're going to drive people in there to buy it.
Perfect. Thank you. I will say I used to work in a boutique and I loved when people just came up to me, and I was the manager, so I would buy the products, and I loved when people just showed up with like a sample or whatever and just been like, hey, here, would you like to sell this? Often just buy it right there as I was working at the boutique. So,
Well,
um,
that's the great thing about
yeah,
sort of the specialty channel is that the people who are running the stores have the autonomy to do
yeah,
that, and you can
really,
build relationships with them, and it's great because sometimes as you get into bigger, more complicated organizations, it's a
yes.
much longer process and more
Yeah, and
frustrating.
often we did have, I would say, new entrants into the market and who didn't know how costing and wholesaling and stuff worked. So it was nice to be able to, have those conversations with them and help them as much as they helped us. People are nicer than you think, and they will answer your questions if you ask, I would
Oh
say.
yeah, usually.
Um, I think that is all for now. Like I said, I will send all the questions to Peter and he will answer them and we'll be able to send it back. I will also send a copy of this. I'll send a YouTube link to this presentation as well as a few other resources that we have, free resources and some funding programs that Perennia has for folks like you guys. So thank you, everyone, very much for your engaging questions and for sticking around with us the extra few minutes. Thank you so much, Peter, for answering and for being such a great resource. And I hope you guys have a great day.